Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Battle Through the Heavens based on novel. So let's start. Now, I can finally relax and practice the God Seal palm. Xiao Yan stretched his lazy waist and smiled slightly. He once again sat down cross-legged on the huge rock and shut his eyes. His mind moved as some information slowly flowed past his heart. Xiao Yan carefully read the training method for the open mountain seal. It was a long while later before he knit his brows and opened his eyes. This God Seal technique is indeed worthy of being a DI class high-level Do technique. The difficulty involved while practicing it was many times that of the flame-splitting tsunami. It actually needs to open 3 specific chi paths before one can condense a palm and maneuver Do chi to unleash the Do technique. Xiao Yan knit his brows tightly. The chi paths in one's body were as complicated as the stars all over the sky. There were a countless number of them. Some of them were tiny and difficult to find. Moreover, they were also extremely brittle. Forget about opening them, they would crack open even if one used a slightly stronger energy to charge at it. The 3 specific chi paths of the open mountain seal were coincidentally 3 remote ones on his right hand. One would definitely have to spend quite a large amount of time in order to open them up. This kind of Do technique, which required one to open up certain veins in order to use, was usually one with a terrifying strength, or one that belonged to the legendary class. Back then, Xiao Yan did not need to purposefully open up any chi paths when he practiced the flame-splitting tsunami. From this, one could tell just how unique this God Seal technique was. Xiao Yan sighed softly. He shook his head helplessly. Now that things had progressed to this stage, he could only give it a try regardless of how difficult it was to open the 3 veins. If he were to give up practicing something that Zun spared no expense to leave for him, he would have really wasted her effort. Opening one's chi paths was an extremely painful thing. The intense pain that occurred when Do chi cleared the chi path and expanded was not something that an ordinary person could endure. However, the expected intense pain and difficulty to widen the chi path did not appear when Do chi was poured into that tiny chi path. Although the flow of Do chi was extremely slow due to the tiny size of the chi path, Xiao Yan could clearly sense that the blocked feeling inside the chi path was slowly disappearing. What is going on? Xiao Yan was somewhat stunned as he studied the chi path that was being gradually unblocked. His heart was filled with disbelief. Since when was opening up a chi path this easy? Of course, at this very moment, Xiao Yan was naturally unaware of the prolonged tug-of-war between the fallen heart flame and the strange liquid when he had entered into his near-death state while he was underground. The greatest victor during that tug-of-war was Xiao Yan's body. Regardless of whether it was his bones, chi paths, muscles, etc., in his body, all of them had been completely refined during that tug-of-war. Hence, any part inside Xiao Yan's body was tougher than those experts who had a strength similar to his. It was also due to his chi paths having previously been refined that Xiao Yan felt that opening up a chi path was this easy. This was similar to a tunnel whose outline had already been roughly constructed by someone. All the people who came after would only need to clear out some of the rock fragments that remained within the tunnel. If an ordinary person were to open their chi paths, it was likely that their chi paths would have already burst from the pressure of the Do chi. How would it be possible to have Xiao Yan's progress? No matter how slow or tortoise-like the pace was, there would ultimately be a time when it arrived at its destination. The first chi path was finally opened by him 5 days after he had entered the deep mountains. He had formally took his first step in practicing the open mountain seal. After having some experience from the first attempt, Xiao Yan was a little more familiar with his remaining chi paths. Although his speed was still similar to a tortoise moving, it would upset a person until he threw up blood and died if one compared his speed with another. The second chi path was also opened up by Xiao Yan without any incident around 10 days or so after the first vein was opened. This kind of smooth training caused Xiao Yan to be so happy that he could not shut his mouth. According to this speed, it was likely that he would be able to completely finish the precondition of opening up the 3 chi paths within 1 month. At that time, he would be able to formally practice the open mountain seal he coveted greatly. Time quietly flowed by in the deep mountains. Perhaps Xiao Yan's reminder had some effect on Medusa. Nothing had come to disturb him ever since he had entered his training condition. This enabled him to obtain an extremely quiet training environment. Exactly after 1 month, the young man on the mountain top, who had his eyes shut, suddenly opened them. A substance-like glow flashed through his eyes, before it gradually disappeared a moment later. Xiao Yan slowly stood up from the huge rock. He raised his head, and let out a long breath. He had opened up 3 veins within a month. This kind of speed was something that even he himself could not quite believe. It was likely that this was quite a good result even when placed among Zuna's clan. Since the chi paths have been opened next, it should be the time to formally practice their open mountain seal. Xiao Yang laughed softly. His right hand formed an extremely strange hand seal in front of him. The hand seal was pushed forward. This was naturally superfluous, without any do qi to activate it. However, Xiao Yan clearly understood that within a short period of time, the strength that the hand seal would emit would likely shock even himself. The lush green color radiating from the vast mountain forest was just like a green sea where one could not see its borders. A black-robed young man was standing on a huge rock at the peak of a mountain within a certain part of this deep mountain range. His expression was solemn, as his right hand formed a strange seal, and he immediately cried out loud, "Open mountain seal." A powerful glow immediately surged from the young man's palm as the cry sounded. Following the appearance of the glow, his palm was suddenly pushed forward. However, the intense glow on his palm was like an epiphyllum, just as his palm moved and instantly disappeared. The palm that was swung merely carried a slight wind. A puff was emitted and a tiny pit was blasted into the ground. Xiao Yang helplessly shook his head as he studied the pit in the ground. He sat on the huge rock as he repeatedly exhaled coarse breath. The energy needed to drive this open mountain seal was really too strong, resulting in him being unable to repeatedly use it. This damn open mountain seal is actually this difficult to practice. Moreover, this is only the first seal. I really don't know just how terrifying the remaining 4 seals will be. Xiao Yang feebly leaned on a cool rock and muttered to himself with a bitter smile. It is indeed worthy of being a high-class do technique. Looks like I can only take things slowly. Xiao Yang sighed and withdrew the anxiety within his heart. He sat cross-legged and calmed his mind. His training mode to begin recovering his exhausted do qi. Currently, Xiao Yang's strength had already reached the peak of the Do Wang class. His absorption of the natural energy was naturally far from what his past self could compare with. Moreover, due to him refining the fallen heart flame, the flame mantra had also evolved to the Di class low level. Of course, this was Xiao Yang's guess from the refining speed of the natural energy by the flame mantra. He was actually unable to guarantee that it had really broken through to the Di class. However, one thing that he was certain about was that the current flame mantra was not merely just a little stronger than before. Regardless of how much natural energy poured into his body, the flame mantra was able to orderly refine all of it. Finally it transformed into pure Do Qi that merged into his body. 2 years ago, Yun Shan had already stepped into the ultimately strong Do Zone class. Now that 2 years had passed, it was only natural that his strength would be even stronger. Xiao Yan clearly understood in his heart that even if he used the large-scale Angry Buddha Lotus Flame, when fighting with an opponent of such strength, it was likely that his chances of victory would not be very high. Therefore the current him needed a powerful fighting strength that could allow him to contend with a true elite Do Zone. Their open mountain seal was his only hope. Therefore, no matter what happened, Xiao Yang had to completely master their open mountain seal of the God Seal technique before he returned to the Jioma Empire. Otherwise, the risk would be too great. Back then, he was forced away like a dog that had lost its home, as he was chased out of the Jioma Empire. This could happen once, but it would never happen twice. Xiao Yang suddenly opened his eyes as this thought flashed through his heart. A coldness rushed over his dark black pupils. Yun Shan, just you wait. I, Xiao Yang, said that I will return, and I will definitely return to avenge this blood feud. Hatred flowed within Xiao Yang's heart as he suddenly stood up. The hand seal in his hand was swiftly formed, and the Do Qi in his body was swiftly circulated at this moment. Open mountain seal. I don't believe I cannot master you. Black Corner region. Feng City. Being the city in the Black Corner region closest to the Inner Academy caused no other faction to dare step into it after Han Feng died. Hence, it gave Xiao Li the opportunity to grab it. After using bloody means to remove some resisting factions within the city, he completely controlled this city. During this half a month, Xiao Li had occupied Feng City. The Xiao Gate, which Xiao Li established, also gained some fame within the Black Corner region. However, the other factions mostly adopted an attitude of watching from the sidelines with cold eyes. They waited for the Jiunan Academy to retaliate against this extremely bold faction, who they had never heard of before. According to their expectation, the current Jiunan Academy would definitely not allow any other factions from the Black Corner region to control the city that was closest to the Inner Academy. However, what caused them to be surprised was that there was still no activity from the Inner Academy after nearly 2 months. This caused some of those significantly large factions from the Black Corner region, who coveted Feng City, to enter an uproar. After 2 years of development by Han Feng, Feng City was a large city that was one of the top ones within the Black Corner region. A couple of enormous auctions were conducted in this place during these 2 years. Although the popularity of Feng City had fallen to a low due to the death of Han Feng and the dissolution of the Black Alliance, it was still not something that one could underestimate from its size and population. This kind of desirable object was naturally something that possessed a great allure to those factions from the Black Corner region. Being able to kill over half a second-tier faction, as well as get the other half to surrender, meant that the strength of this Xiao Gate was likely one that possessed the qualification to nearly enter the category of a first-tier faction. This kind of strength was enough to cause some of the factions looking at it maliciously to weaken their hostility. Of course, with the allure of such a large egg like the Feng City, it was natural that one would not be able to enjoy an everlasting peace. Hence, the peace had only lasted for half a month before Xiao Li obtained news that 3 first-tier factions within the Black Corner region had joined hands to attack Feng City and take the managing rights from Xiao Gate. 3 first-tier factions joining hands. This lineup might not be comparable to the Black Alliance back then, but it could not be underestimated. Faced with this kind of powerful attack, which possessed at least 3 elite Do Huangs, it was naturally impossible for Xiao Li's own strength to block it. Hence, a message pigeon quietly flew out from Feng City the moment the enormous amount of troops from the 3 large factions started to head for Feng City. Finally, it headed for the deep mountains within the Inner Academy. Although the open mountain seal, this time around, was a little crude, Xiao Yang believed that he would definitely be able to reach complete mastery through practice, if he was given sufficient time. At that time, the strength of this open mountain seal would likely become even more frightening. Everything was difficult at the beginning. Since Xiao Yang already possessed quite a good start, success was only a matter of time. Xiao Yang panted intensely. He flapped the dark green wings on his back, and slowly landed on a messy mountain top. After over a month of training, he had currently reached an initial mastery of the open mountain seal. If he wanted to reach complete mastery, he would need time and opportunity to hone it through actual combat experience. It is indeed worthy of being a DI class high-level Do technique. I had merely used it at its initial stage, but its strength is not any weaker than the flame-splitting tsunami. I will have another trump card when fighting with another in the future. The dark green flame wings on Xiao Yang's back quietly disappeared as he softly laughed. Kailin. Xiao Yang turned around and suddenly shouted loudly to the vast forest all around. However, there was not the slightest reaction even after a long time. Xiao Yang had no other choice as he cried out once again, "Medusa, there is a problem. Come." This time around, a 7-colored glow finally rushed out from a certain part of the forest a short moment after the cry sounded. Within a couple of blinks, the cold, indifferent Queen Medusa appeared in front of Xiao Yang. "There are some issues that require me to go to the Black Corner region. Let's go." Xiao Yang automatically ignored the cold face of Queen Medusa as he spoke. "You can forget about getting me to be your free fighter." Medusa's eyebrows were vertical as she spoke in a cool voice. "There will no longer be anyone who will help you refine the soul recovery pill if I die." Xiao Yang smiled indifferently. His back immediately shook, and a beautiful pair of dark green fire wings appeared. The fire wings flapped and Xiao Yang's body swiftly rose up into the air as wild wind surrounded his body. Finally, he turned around and charged toward the Black Corner region. Xiao Yang knew that Xiao Li had met some trouble from the letter. However, he did not plan to gather helpers from the inner academy. With his current strength, there was basically no one who could stop him within the Black Corner region. Moreover, one should not forget Medusa, who was currently following him after reaching an agreement to cooperate. This was a true elite dozong. Moreover, she might be even stronger than Su Qian. Given Xiao Yang's and Medusa's strength, it was likely that they would be sufficient to sweep over the entire Black Corner region. The so-called Gold-Silver brothers might be able to join hands to delay Su Qian. However, if their opponent was Queen Medusa, it was likely that they would not be so lucky. After all, she was not an ordinary elite dozong. Around half an hour ago, 3 large units had swaggered into Feng City, before finally rushing to the manor where Medicine Emperor Han Feng had once resided. Currently, that place housed the faction who controlled Feng City, Xiao Gate. Most of the people within Feng City had heard of these 3 powerful factions. After all, their reputation was sufficient to spread all over the Black Corner region, since they were first-tier factions. Hence, almost everyone was familiar with them. Dark Sky Sect, Luoshou Gate, and Wild Lion Gang. These 3 large factions were extremely renowned, powerful factions within the Black Corner region. The leaders of the 3 large factions were experts, who were ranked within the top 10 of the Black ranking. Any random person among them was not weaker than Fan Lao, who had died in Xiao Yang's hands. These 3 large factions dominated the Black Corner region, and had always been overbearing. They even ignored Han Feng when he invited these 3 large factions to join him when he had established the Black Alliance. This kind of action might have caused Han Feng to be extremely furious, but he had let things be, because he was afraid of the strength of these 3 large factions. Back then, the Black Alliance was very grand. However, these 3 factions were able to choose to reject joining them even in that kind of situation. From this, one could tell that they possessed quite the strong capital. After all, the leaders of the 3 large factions were no fools. They would naturally be unwilling to offend those whom they could not afford to offend. Although Han Feng was someone whom they were afraid of, it was far from the point where they had to bow before him. There were many people who felt pity for the so-called Xiao Gate now that these 3 factions had sent their forces into Feng City. In the eyes of many people, Xiao Gate was just like a student meeting a master when faced with these 3 old first-tier factions, despite the Xiao Gate possessing a qualification that was near a first-tier faction. If the leader of Xiao Gate was sensible, he would obediently hand over the rights to control the city. This was the wisest choice. You are the leader of Xiao Gate, right? I shall not beat around the bush. Don't blame us for washing this place with blood if you don't give me a clear answer within an hour. A middle-aged large man, with a bare chest that showed an enormous lion roaring toward the sky was faintly visible on his chest, glanced at Xiao Li. A smile surfaced on his face, which was filled with a bloody scent. Xiao Li's expression immediately became gloomy. The large group of black-clothed men behind him also emitted a clang sound as they drew their weapons from their waists. In an instant, the atmosphere within the hall had become anxious with swords drawn. It was one that would break out into a killing fight at the slightest disagreement. You want my Xiao Gate to get out of Feng City? Even Han Feng wasn't qualified to do so. What makes you think you have the right? A faint cold laugh suddenly resounded just as the atmosphere was about to completely collapse. A black figure immediately appeared in the middle of the hall, in a ghost-like manner, in front of everyone's eyes. A joy surged onto Xiao Li's face when he saw the sudden appearance of the black-robed young man. Since Xiao Yang had managed to rush over, it was likely that they could smoothly settle the calamity today. He had always held a confidence that exceeded common sense toward the former's ability. Who are you? The first person to open his mouth was the old man from the Dark Sky Sect. His gaze was filled with shadows as he stared at Xiao Yang and asked in a hoarse, cold voice. Friend, I shall warn you that this is a matter between us and the Xiao Gate. It is best that an outsider doesn't intervene. Getting involved in something that doesn't concern you is the most illogical act within the Black Corner region. The large man with exposed arms locked his gaze firmly on Xiao Yang as he spoke in a solemn voice. The strange agility that the person in front had displayed caused them to be shocked. Hence, no one dared underestimate this person. He is the true leader of our Xiao Gate. How can you say that he is an outsider? Xiao Li smiled faintly. The woman who had appeared immediately caused the atmosphere in the hall to become stiff. Xiao Li's face was shocked. He was also acquainted with this frightening woman, who had been chasing after Xiao Yan with the intent to kill him. By appearing at this moment, she was undoubtedly exacerbating their situation. The three leaders on the opposite side had similar expressions as Xiao Li. Their faces had become shocked at this moment. This was because they did not discover the slightest trace of air movement. It was as though this woman had been standing there without moving, only to reveal herself at this moment. This clearly told them that she was no ordinary woman. The strength of the three great leaders were all at the Do Huang class. Despite their strength, they still felt such a feeling of pressure. That meant that this bewitching beauty in front of them might be an ultimate expert of the Do Zone class. Do Zone, the throats of the three great leaders quietly rolled a little. Cold perspiration surfaced on their foreheads. Back then, the Black Alliance did not even possess a true elite Do Zone despite its strength. It was unexpected that this small Xiao Gate currently possessed such a frightening person. Xiao Yang also sensed Queen Medusa suddenly appear behind him. He turned around and smiled toward her before giving Xiao Li a comforting hand sign. Only after seeing Xiao Yang's action did Xiao Li, who was drenched in cold sweat, quietly sigh in relief. From the looks of the situation, it seemed that Xiao Yang had already reached some sort of agreement with this terrifying woman. Medusa did not have the slightest reaction toward Xiao Yang's smile. Her narrow and long pupils were filled with an unusual allure coldly swept across the hall. Anyone who was caught by her gaze would feel their skin turn cold. Some of those who were weaker could not help but feel their knees turn soft. The pressure of the aura of a Do Zone was actually this strong. Since the three of you are so interested in Feng City, why don't we engage in a business transaction? Xiao Yang interlocked his 10 fingers. His laughter reverberated within the hall, causing the three leaders to be stunned. Episode 47 Part 1 will end here.